For those that haven't participated in a soiree before, and just for the benefit of the attendees that may be new to this, the soiree format is that presenters can either present a short 5-minute presentation live or a 1-minute pre-recorded fast forward video. And as we have it, our very first session of the day has both of those formats featured. Bernardo is going to be giving us a 5-minute presentation to introduce the work that he's submitted, and Richard submitted a 1-minute video. And so we're going to go through those first, and then following that, the three of us will have some discussion about the content that they shared. And I would encourage attendees that as you're watching the presentation and video, and then conversation, please do use the Q&A to, if you have any questions to ask. I'm going to watch the Q&A more closely than I'm watching the chat. So if you do have a question that you want to have posted to or shared with our two panelists in this session, please be sure to use the Q&A entry for that. And with that, I'll hand it over to Bernardo. Take it away, Bernardo, and share us your submission.
So, hello everyone. Nick, can you confirm everyone can see my presentation? Okay, thank you. So, first of all, let me thank you so much for being here. It is a great pleasure to participate for the second time in this event. During my presentation, I'm going to address the education process of geosciences through a novel approach, which I will explain in a little while. Last year, we have the pleasure to present how we have an overview of teaching a virtual and augmented reality course for the last 10 years. And today I'm going to focus on a specific course that we had for a team of students. This particular work, which as you can see is a multidisciplinary challenges, the idea was to support geoscience education. As you may be familiar, it is important for students in this field to be able to visit specific locations, to learn, to explore, and to analyze specific geological sites as well as their characteristics. For example, being able to look at the rock that you are seeing right now and identify specific regions of interest, and also to infer what may have caused those cracks, and also to collect samples and taking them away to explore later in their laboratories. Okay, another example that you are seeing right now would be, for example, to conduct a visit to a location. Right now you are seeing a place here in Portugal, which is where you can find dinosaur footprints, and this can be very relevant because the students can learn as well with the teacher when they are on site. So the teacher can explain specific concepts associated with some of these locations. But there is also some constraints, and of course, with this in mind, you have to take into consideration that not all universities, which is the target audience that I'm referring to with this work, have the ability to be able to take their students and to visit these locations. Although they can be relevant for the students, some universities do not have the financial support, and there may be also other limitations. And with that in mind, we actually came up with the research question, which can we use digital realities to assist the teachers with the education process of specific geological phenomena? And to do that, we start to address this question. We propose the use of 3D reconstruction, as you can see on your left, as well as virtual reality and a large display, for example, a projector or a large TV. We believe that this way the teacher can be immersed in a virtual reality experience, which of course needs to be collected. Someone has to go to the site and do a recording, let's say like this, using 3D reconstruction devices of the model of the structure or wherever we want to use later during the classes. And then the students can visualize the experience through the large display. We hope that this can allow the students to learn from the teacher while the teacher is immersed in the virtual reality environment. Here it is also possible to move or to perform the teletransport to a desired location. We can also pick objects and manipulate them as we need. And finally, we also have the ability to annotate the 3D models, which we can allow the teacher, for example, to point to a specific region and also to draw something or even to write, to create notes for the students to better understand specific contexts. Of course, this is the result of a human-centered design methodology. We did this with the collaboration of another department here at our university. This was, of course, very important for us to understand what were the requirements that the teacher and also the students had. And then after that process, we came up with some requirements and we allow a team of 2 students to create the first prototype that you are seeing right now. We also have the opportunity to conduct an initial study with 20 participants, allowing us to compare our proposal with the traditional approach, which, as you can imagine, nowadays is display images in videos. This is what is currently being used in the classrooms. And as you can see as well here, based on this, for most of the dimensions, our approach was actually better. There is one that it is highlighted, which is the level of social presence. As you can imagine, when the teacher is immersed, having a virtual reality headset in his head, the students, although they are able to better understand some of the concepts which are being projected, the students are not able to create the same level of empathy with the teacher. And this is something that, of course, we need to take into consideration moving forward. And besides that, we were also able to identify other limitations, or as we like to call it, next steps that we still need to address in the future moving on. For example, the being able to integrate quizzes and surveys, not only having 3D models, but also allow to have much more detail and content, allowing to have a better understanding of the concepts that are being taught to the students. We also need to take, as I said, into consideration the level of social presence, and also allow, this is also a very important topic, we need to give students the ability to also being able to interact with the models. Right now, the teacher is the only one that has a virtual reality headset, but moving forward, we also believe that it is important to also allow the students to have a means to be able to participate in the classroom, either through, for example, as you are seeing right now, a handheld device, or even having their own virtual reality headsets. Okay, I hope this makes my 5 minutes. Then thank you everyone for your attention. And with this, I finish my presentation.
Thank you, Bernardo. Excellent. And so I will go ahead and share my screen. There's applause. I will share my screen to share Richard's presentation. Hopefully everyone can see it. It looks like you can. And so we'll hit play now.
Hi, I'm Richard Thompson, Coordinator of Digital Design at NJIT. Immersive worlds are in high demand in today's games and films, but students often underestimate the unseen effort to create them. Exuberance and inexperience lead to project creep and also to frustration. The scaffolded assignments of this curriculum begin with an exercise introducing students to the entire production workflow, including low poly, high poly modeling, and storytelling through texturing. Next up is pre-production with targeted questions and creative constraints. An 8x8 indoor maze with changes in verticality to enhance immersion while using modular kit design techniques. First, they need a utilitarian core, the walls, the floors, and stairs, gray boxing and testing their bare bones maze. Then, plug-in socket elements that can be swapped in and out to provide variety. Next, a set of variances to embellish the story of their world and planned interactivity. Texturing, however, is vital. Learning techniques to hide seams, mitigate art fatigue, and deepen the environmental narrative. The last task adds lighting for mood, some interactivity, as well as sound and cinematic effects in post. Students gain industry-standard workflows and create portfolio-worthy work that showcases their storytelling and design abilities. Use this QR code to view sample student work.
Well, thank you both for your presentations. um, so for each of you are approaching the this idea of immersion in different ways. And for Bernardo, you're taking the real world and bringing it into the classroom for teaching, in terms of it being a physical place. Richard, I feel like you're bringing the real world pipeline into the classroom for the students to experience what it is like to get an entire project in a very short amount of time, like almost a crucible, to go from an idea to fully realized construction. Um, Bernardo, on your side, I'm curious, are students involved in creating the virtual immersive spaces? And are you involving geological students in that, or are you bringing in, what I would call digital native students for that? How does that work?
So thank you for your question. Actually, the person to blame is my wife. She's a PhD student on geosciences, and she's actually giving some classes right now. So some years ago, when she started to giving classes, she was actually worried that some of the students were not able to understand properly some of the concepts. Although they are able to do it on a medium level, the specific details and the engagement level, she was a little bit worried that that could be improved. And since she is familiar with the type of work that our team is doing on the research level, she started to question us about if there was something that we can do, if there was some type of approach. Since we have some experience with 3D reconstruction, virtual reality, and so on, we started to try to think if how we could do it. And we actually conducted a little bit of a mini focus group with her supervisor, and some of the students from the geosciences department. And sometime after that, we were able to have some requirements. And this was actually the start of our idea. We also teach virtual and augmented reality classes. This is an elective course. So during that, we have a practical assignment that students need to figure it out, but they are able to provide their own ideas, but we also have our own ideas that we are able to give to them. Two students selected this project, and what you actually saw before was the result of one semester where they were able to grab some devices to do the 3D reconstructions as you saw it, and also bring the models into Unity, try to improve a little bit the models, and also afterwards create this was one of the first applications that we have for the Oculus Quest 2. The devices were new, so the students have to do a lot of work. Although this is one semester, we believe that they were able to create a mini pipeline. I'm going to collect the Nick line for research for that. So we were able to create a mini pipeline. Of course, as you also saw, there is a lot of opportunities moving forward. We are hoping that moving forward, there are other students that want also to come to this idea and improve what already exists. And I think this is a quick overview of what we were able to have to this moment.
Great. I'm going to come back to you in a second with a question from our attendees. But I want to go to Richard and ask about how you think the students, or if the students have shared how they feel about that experience, because it sounds like, they come in like, I'm going to make a whole virtual world. And then, all of a sudden they're faced with these constraints, and there's this pipeline of one thing, you got to do this first. How is that received by the students, and is there a transformation in that outlook from when they're first brought into the class and they get started for the first time, and then once they've experienced it at the end?
Yeah, that's a great question. Sorry for my voice, everyone. Uh, I'm after doing this for many, many years, teaching 3D and 3D art and stuff, I sort of realized, at least my focus is providing challenging assignments, but achievable ones. And so creating creative constraints on the design is also something that honestly they'll discover in the real world as well. And there's lots of literature in terms of like as long as students have can design anything and have no limits, that it's very likely that the project will never be finished if everything is possible. So the thing is about concerning that. Now, having said that, yeah, it's a little bit of a challenge because you have students in this field that are incredibly motivated, incredibly ambitious, and incredibly creative. So they want to do everything. And so it's finding a way to word your instructions in a way that's positive while still constraining them, if that makes sense. So the things that I learned, I mean, this all comes from a presentation I saw by Bethesda Studios at GDC a while back. And so I developed it and I developed over years, and then I changed things, adjusting to how, the things that students struggled with in particular. So, one thing that I became very firm about was the maze that was only an 8 by 8 grid, that there was absolutely not necessary at all. Like some students wanted to do 12 by 12. Some students wanted to have an environment outside, which I just didn't want them to get into, because it just became a thing which never could be done in one semester. Right. So it's a great question. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you. That's great. So then back to Bernardo, this question we have from our attendee, Ryan, is asking mainly about what you see as a minimum cost per student when it comes to a full, like immersive VR setup. So he's specifically calling out headset, AV, controller, etc. And that's, Ryan talks about experiencing the immersive content, but I also wonder, since you have the students also creating that content, they need to be able to create the content as well as experience it. So I don't know if you could speak to any of that.
Okay, I will do my best at least. Regarding prices, as I said, nowadays we are using Oculus Quest 2. We can also move forward with Oculus Quest 3, which are novelty nowadays. And nowadays also, we are talking about $500 more or less for a virtual reality headset like this. So depending on the number of students as well, this already give you an idea of the cost that we may bring to the classroom. But I think we need not only to take this into consideration, but also have into consideration that this type of devices are very useful for not only geosciences, which is the use case that we are handling right now, but they are also relevant for other courses. For example, during the recent years, we have also reached out by persons from other departments, chemistry, music, psychology, and so on, that also wanted this level of solutions, okay? So they would like to have also, not necessarily to all classes, but to specific classes, they would like also to have virtual reality headsets where there are a lot of use cases that this type of devices may be relevant. And also, since, for example, if the total amount of money that a university would need to spend could be divided not just on one department, but maybe on different departments. And for example, the devices could be for the university, and depending on the classes, they could be on one site, and everyone that needs to use them could go to that site. Also, there is no need to have just the devices being used during classes. They can also be relevant, for example, for dissertations, PhDs, and so on. So maybe $500 can be too much if we think about it really quick. But on the long run, I think that we can actually have a good example of use cases where we can use this type of solutions. Of course, to do that, we also need someone that creates this type of solutions. So the investment is not only on hardware, but we also need a team that is available to handle all the requirements for all the persons that are interested in using them. So I think that having an amount is very difficult at this moment. But of course, right now we are just trying to create a first prototype, see if it is viable and if it can actually be used and how students react to it. And so far we have been having good results, of course, this is very relevant to us. And maybe in the future we can go forward and also address other use cases.
Great, thank you. And then, Richard, I gather from your presentation that your class is a lot of times focused on beginner students, at least beginner to immersive authoring in general. Do any of your students experience like a technological cultural shock when, coming into that? Like if I know that in my own experience, a lot of times if I have a course that's open and to anyone, no prerequisites, that it's not unusual to have perhaps a graphic design student have an interest in 3D, come in and, they open up their MacBook Air and like they're ready to go and like, oh, hmm. What's your experience in terms of like minimum specs for, getting to work in this kind of space?
Right. So in this particular set of assignments and project for a semester, the students have had modeling, 3D modeling. They have had 3D texturing, and not that it comes into play. They have had 3D animation to a certain extent, right? So a lot of that just folds into this. The other thing is the low poly. Normally in previous incarnations, I didn't, because I had it as a part of a separate course, I didn't have to go through the introductory thing of low poly, high poly modeling. However, having said that, it's possible that that's going to be moot if it isn't already at a certain point, right? So it's something that I could eliminate at some point. I think that the thing that I was sort of focused on also is that the students go through a journey where they can actually now be more informed about how long some processes take, because when they go into it, there's no way they know. I mean, there's times that I'm still trying to figure it out, right? How long certain things are going to take. And then as they move on further into the program, and I actually just was communicating to one of those students who is now um, now in their senior thesis production, and they want to create a sort of more expansive game level based off of what they learned in this studio. So this studio is really to show them the workflow, to get hopefully a portfolio piece at the end of it, and then also um, uh, inform them about the design choices that they might make later on in the degree program.
For Richard, is this a newer course in the program that you've been involved in? And if so, have you seen a change in approach for the students that have gone through this course versus before this existed?
Um, I think it's a studio course, so it was there all the time. May have angled it in a certain direction, right? In terms of the description, but I think it's beneficial. Now those students are moving on to a studio where they eventually will be creating something in VR, right? So this is helpful in that respect. The other thing is we have a large informatics um, uh, department where they use Unity as well. So actually, going back to one of your earlier questions was, how do the students take it? There's initial resistance to using Unity, which I understand, but that they prefer to use Unreal at this stage of the game. But I told them, the industry right now still has more Unity, and also that if we do any collaboration with the informatics department, that it's important that they know Unity. Um,
Mhm.
yeah. So I think that the most fun thing for me actually in some ways was a student who I had in the studio just before that, where they were learning 3D texturing with 3D Painter and modeling and rigging and animation, and they had done okay but not great in that course, and they just went crazy in this course and were able to achieve something beyond the scope that I could even have thought that they were, that student in particular was able to do. So that was a really nice surprise. And it's actually that student who's now, as part of their thesis, is doing the level design.
Mhm. Fantastic. And then Bernardo, clearly your course experience is newer. It's particularly introducing VR into geosciences. Have any of the geosciences students involved developed a new affinity for computer graphics and interaction out of this, or is it, or do they come out of this thinking like, oh, I'm really glad I chose geology. I am never putting on one of those digital things again.
That is a very funny question. Most of this right now we are actually not using this as a full development solution on the classes. Okay, so we just have a prototype and we just conducted one user study with 20 participants, but it was really easy to find participants because they are willing to try this new type of devices. They know they are almost appearing everywhere, so they were really eager to understand if they are actually relevant, if they actually could use them, what they are able to do, and so on. Of course, as I told you, we are just giving the virtual reality headset to the teacher right now, but still they were able to enjoy the class and learn different concepts, at least in a different way, which they are not used to. Of course, by the end of the study, we actually have to do a little session because everyone wants to experience what the teacher was seeing, to see if it was the same thing that they were seeing during the classes, try the controllers and so on. So it was really funny. And my perspective is that the students are able to give virtual reality a chance, and maybe in the future they are actually hoping also to have this type of devices not only on one class but maybe on other classes. And let's see if that is possible in the future. We hope so, and we will try at least to have this type of solution more broadcast in the future.
Excellent. So we have time. I'm going to ask one more short answer question for each of you, and that is, on your next iteration, what's the one adjustment that you most want to make based on your last iteration to your experience? So I'll start with Bernardo. Like, is there one, you gave a great list of like, these are things that we want to improve, but like on this next cycle, is there like one particular adjustment that comes to
Yeah,
mind?
definitely have interaction for the students. That was the main thing that the students missed. Although they were able to see what the teacher was actually doing and talk with the teacher, they felt that they also need to have a more active participant in the overall process. So moving forward, we have to, of course, try different approaches, see which one works better. Of course, we give each student a virtual reality headset, the price is starting to rising up. So we also need to take that into consideration. Maybe have a tablet that can go from student to student. We still need to understand what may be the best approach. But of course, interaction here is the point where we need to go in the future.
Thanks. And Richard, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, other than if technology takes us that way to get rid of the low poly, high poly stuff, I always listen to the feedback from students. So some semesters everything's fine. I mean, it is definitely challenging, and sometimes, one or two students do sort of say they were a little overwhelmed. So it's always about judging whether that was that particular student or whether I need to, tone it down a little bit, my demands. So that's something I always adjust. Um, but probably the last thing would be sort of collaboration with more people who do coding, right? So we can do that. And I'm in talks, I would like to arrange that obviously in-house but I'm in talks with another university with their graduate game engineering program, and see whether which is largely programming, and see whether we can work as teams in terms of that. And I think, there's a lot of the students who went through the process here at NJIT expressed a lot of excitement about that possibility.
Yeah, that sounds fantastic. I mean, the earlier they can get that cross-pollination of the coding and the art side is fantastic. So, well, thank you both. Really appreciate your submissions, this discussion, your presentations. This is fantastic, and what a great way to kick off our soiree today. So, thank you so much.